Tony Robbins begins by reminding us that every human being carries a story, and most people drag their past like a heavy chain without realizing how deeply it shapes the choices they make today. He explains that letting go is not forgetting, not denying, not pretending something didn't hurt. Letting go means breaking the emotional link that forces your past to control your future. Tony walks the room slowly, sensing the emotions of the participant in front of him. The person shares how years of disappointment have created a belief that life cannot change. Tony listens intensely, then tells them that the mind creates certainty even from painful memories simply because the brain wants something familiar to hold on to. He challenges them by saying that familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar possibility. The participant begins to cry as Tony asks them to identify the moment their past became their identity. He pushes deeper, asking who they were before the pain, before the heartbreak, before the betrayal, before the loss that froze their spirit. Slowly, the participant starts to recall glimpses of their younger self, a self filled with dreams, energy, and courage. Tony says that person is not gone, they are buried under years of emotional dust. As the participant breathes heavily, Tony instructs them to stand up and claim the truth, that the past is a place of reference, not residence. He makes them repeat it with intensity, loud enough to break the emotional pattern that has lived inside for years. The energy in the room shifts as the participant begins to feel, for the first time in years, that letting go might actually be possible. And Tony reminds them that transformation doesn't begin with the world changing, it begins when you decide the old story is no longer your home. Tony begins to dismantle the belief system that the participant has lived with. He explains that every belief is just a thought we've rehearsed so many times that it feels like truth. The participant has believed for years that they are not enough, that they are stuck, that the world keeps taking things away from them. Tony challenges them to question every one of those beliefs. He asks, who told you this story? Whose voice are you hearing? Is it your voice, or the voice of someone who didn't even know how to love themselves? The participant is stunned because they realize their story isn't even theirs, it's inherited pain. Tony pushes them to see how the brain stores memories emotionally, not logically, meaning pain feels bigger than it truly is, especially when repeated mentally for years. He asks the participant to imagine carrying a giant backpack filled with stones representing every regret, mistake, and hurt from their past. Then he tells them most people spend their entire lives dragging that backpack even though the weight no longer serves a purpose. Tony tells them that letting go is not an act of weakness, it is an act of strength, because it means choosing freedom over familiarity. He encourages the participant to take ownership of their future by refusing to let past circumstances define who they become. As Tony raises his voice with intensity, the participant starts to feel their internal resistance crumble. They begin to understand that their past is not a prison, it is a classroom, and the lesson is ready to end. Tony asks them what they want their next chapter to look like, and for the first time in a long time, they answer with hope instead of fear. The room fills with a new energy as they declare that they want to move forward with courage. Tony now shifts the intervention toward emotional release. He tells the participant that every emotion they suppress eventually becomes a pattern, and every pattern becomes a personality. He explains that people don't get stuck because life is cruel, they get stuck because the emotion attached to a memory has not been processed or released. Tony instructs them to recall the specific moment that still hurts the most. As they describe it, their voice trembles. Tony walks closer and tells them to feel every bit of the emotion, not to run from it. Because he knows that healing cannot happen without facing the emotional truth. He guides them to breathe deeply, to allow the pain to rise, not with fear, but with presence. The participant begins crying again, this time more intensely. Tony places his hand gently on their shoulder and tells them that tears are not a sign of weakness, they are a sign that the body is finally letting go of what the heart has carried too long. He asks them to describe what they wish they could have said back then, what they wish someone had said to them, what they wish had gone differently. The participant speaks through sobs, releasing years of silent suffering. Tony asks them to repeat a powerful affirmation, I release what no longer belongs to me. With each repetition, their emotional energy loosens. Tony instructs them to visualize the moment floating away, dissolving, no longer chained to their identity. Slowly, their breathing steadies. Tony tells them that emotional pain is not meant to stay forever, it is meant to move through us. And when we allow it to move, we make space for something new, clarity, peace, and strength. Tony now turns their attention towards self-forgiveness. He says that one of the heaviest parts of the past is not what others did to us, but what we blame ourselves for. The participant has carried guilt, shame, and regret for years. Tony tells them that guilt is nothing more than a signal that your values matter, but when you hold on to guilt for too long, it becomes poison. He asks them what they've been blaming themselves for. They open up about mistakes they made and opportunities they lost. Tony listens carefully and then asks, "Would you judge someone you love the same way you judge yourself?" The participant shakes their head. Tony tells them that we often extend compassion to everyone except ourselves, and that this lack of self-forgiveness is the root of emotional imprisonment. He explains that failure is a teacher, not a punishment, and that the only real mistake is refusing to grow from the lesson. Tony guides them through a powerful internal dialogue where they speak to their younger self, the version of them who made those decisions. They are instructed to offer understanding, compassion, and forgiveness to that younger version. The participants' posture softens as they begin to speak words they've never said to themselves before. Tony tells them that self-forgiveness does not erase the past, but it rewrites the meaning of the story. It allows the heart to release the burden. As the participant breathes deeply, Tony reminds them that they are worthy of healing, worthy of love, and worthy of a second chance. And that second chance begins the moment they choose to stop punishing themselves for things they have already survived. Tony now directs their focus toward rewriting the narrative. He explains that every person has two stories, the one that happened, and the one they tell themselves about what happened. The event may have been painful, but the story we attach to that event determines whether we feel empowered or broken. Tony asks the participant to describe their old story in one sentence. They say, "My past ruined my life." Tony immediately challenges it. He tells them that the past cannot ruin anything unless you give it permission to. Then he asks them to rewrite that story using empowering language. After some silence, the participant says, "My past taught me strength." Tony smiles and says that this is the truth they must now live by. He explains that the story we choose becomes the lens through which we see ourselves. A disempowering story leads to a disempowered life, but an empowering story changes how we show up in every moment. Tony instructs the participant to speak out loud what they want their future story to be, who they want to become, how they want to show up, what kind of life they want to live. The participant describes a future filled with courage, opportunity, love, and growth. Tony intensifies the energy in the room by making them declare it with certainty. He reminds them that the brain believes whatever you tell it consistently. As they repeat their new narrative, the old identity begins to dissolve. Tony tells them that this new story is not just words, it is a decision, a commitment, a promise to themselves. And once they choose this story, the past no longer has power over them. Tony now brings in the idea of taking physical control to break emotional patterns. He explains that the body and mind are connected, and emotional pain often lives in the body as tension, posture, breathing, or subtle reactions. He asks the participant to stand tall, breathe deeply, and change their physiology instantly. The room comes alive with intensity as Tony shouts with power, "Change your state." He teaches them that when you shift your body, your mind follows. The participant lifts their chest, opens their shoulders, and breathes with strength. Tony instructs them to anchor this new physical state to their new story. He tells them to think of a powerful moment in their life, something that made them feel unstoppable. As they recall it, their expression changes. Tony guides them through a peak state exercise where they say their new identity out loud with force. This breaks the emotional pattern that kept them stuck. He explains that letting go of the past is not only mental, it's physical. When the body changes, the emotional memory begins to lose its grip. The participant starts to smile for the first time in a long time. Tony tells them this is what freedom feels like, the ability to shift from sorrow to strength in seconds. And he emphasizes that this new state must become their daily practice. He tells them to decide right now that this is who they are becoming, not a person defined by pain, but a person powered by possibility. The energy in the room rises as Tony pushes them to embody this identity fully. Tony guides the participant toward a vision of their future. He asks them to imagine waking up tomorrow with the weight of the past gone. How would they walk? How would they speak? How would they make decisions? He tells them that clarity comes when the heart is free. The participant begins describing a future where they are confident, loving, strong, and intentional. Tony instructs them to visualize it in detail: the people they want around them, the habits they want to build, the opportunities they want to create. He teaches them that the future becomes real when you feel it emotionally before it happens physically. The participant begins to feel excitement, something they haven't felt in years. Tony tells them that momentum begins with small steps, choosing new habits, new thoughts, new actions. He reminds them that progress does not require perfection, it only requires intention. As they build this vision, Tony tells them that the past cannot follow them unless they turn around and invite it back. He emphasizes that the door to the past is now closed, not locked, but closed, and it is their decision whether to open it again or walk forward with courage. The participant nods with conviction, feeling a new sense of purpose rising within them. Tony tells them that the future they see is not fantasy, it is the blueprint for their next chapter. All they need is commitment, consistency, and belief. Tony concludes the intervention with a powerful reminder: transformation happens in a moment, but maintaining it is a daily practice. He tells the participant that letting go is not something you do once, it is a commitment you renew every day by choosing peace over pain, growth over fear, and intention over old patterns. He asks them to take 3 deep breaths and feel the difference inside themselves. They do, and the emotional shift is visible in their eyes. Tony tells them that they are no longer the same person who walked into the room, they are someone who faced their deepest wounds and chose to rise instead of retreat. He encourages them to celebrate this breakthrough, not because everything is solved, but because they now have the tools and the identity to create a new life. The participant stands with strength, their body language transformed. Tony tells them that the past is now behind them, not erased, but integrated, a chapter that shaped them, not a prison that limits them. He tells them to walk forward with courage, knowing that they are capable of far more than they ever believed. As the room applauds, the participant wipes their tears with a smile. Tony ends by saying that life rewards those who decide to move forward, those who choose to let go, those who choose to live fully despite the past. And with that final message, the intervention closes, leaving the participant empowered, liberated, and ready to step into a future they once thought was impossible.